And he flat out said that he cannot reveal specifics of the negotiation while they are going on. And he said, I know that is frustrating for you guys. He flat out said that he knew that it was frustrating for the media who wants to run off and have the conversation. He talked about learning things based upon what took place last summer and the way that it went down, saying his exact quote was, obviously I could have handled that better, but we've moved on, which I thought was an interesting phrase because that was the phrase that was used at this event a couple years ago when they thought they were going to wave a hand and Liv as a competitor was going to go away. He went on to say, I've been humbled by it, but the progress that we've made, including SSG's investment in a complicated business, we've come a long way. We're always striving to get better. I think part of what they realized there, and again, I'll tell you, it was my suspicion from the beginning, that you come out with this announcement, now you've got to go back and you've got to try to address a constituency that, by and large, and as we heard from Xander Schauffele, it was a question of trust, and they were pissed off. So you have a couple of guys that all of a sudden become the de facto spokesman for the PGA Tour, very accomplished men. But we didn't really know who they were. If you're on the inside of the game, you know them, sure. But we're talking about messages that go out to the fan base at large. And their message was, hey, it's okay. The PGA Tour won here. I'm paraphrasing. I'm giving you my interpretation. The PGA Tour won here. PGA Tour is going to be in charge. You know, whatever you're asking about, whether Liv lives or dies, Team Golf lives or dies, that's all going to be Jay's decision. And from the start, I'm hearing all that. I'm going, you know what? That violates a pretty important rule. The golden rule. Now, he who has the gold makes the rules. I can't imagine that was sitting very well. And then behind the scenes, we heard, and Patrick Cantlay was kind of the poster boy for this and all the rumors that were swirling around, that there was a constituency going, wait a minute, guys, why don't we talk to somebody else about a source of funds? And now, lo and behold, 1.5 on the way to perhaps $3 billion invested from other people. Changes posture, changes the position, changes the, I don't call it nervousness, the heightened concern. Now we're starting to define the why. It's starting to come through. It's starting to happen. Now we're starting to understand that this press conference that Jay did and what he could say, what he wouldn't say, what he couldn't say because of the stature of the stature of the negotiations that he commented kind of shows, you know, it's March. It's the players. You got to address the media. Get it. Timing's really bad for you right now with everything else that you have going on. He was asked a question. The media should ask a question. The players trust you? He gave the response of, well, you have to ask them. Well, they did. And you got responses like you got from Xander Schauffele. Not the only one. We've heard from other players. They're mad. That's their why. They're mad. They felt like this snuck up on them. Unfortunately, you can't do in anything like this in the world of sport that we live in today, and certainly in the world of golf, because if they had contacted the hundreds of players that Jay referenced and said, hey, keep this on the QT, this is what we're working on, it would have been leaked. There's not a dispatch that can go out to players that there are not players that are not going to immediately leak that to the media. That's just how it is. Why that is, I don't know, but that's how it is. So again, my interest here is not to defend one position or another. It's to try to understand the why. And my guess is what happened was after they went through that initial flurry last summer and Jay had to take his time away, remember, et cetera, et cetera. Well, that's because all of it hit the fan. And my guess is that Yasser and Piff sat back and went, well, wait a minute. We signed this agreement to work on making an agreement. But let's understand some guidelines here in terms of fairness, in terms of equity. Then the PGA Tour continued their conversation with SSG, which you're very proud of, and he spoke about it multiple times as being a major advancement. But in the world of sport, the scorecard, or probably better phrased, the grade that you're going to bring home on that card, is not based upon how much money you've put into the coffers so that you can have a negotiation with another party where you've leveled the playing field in terms of equity proposed to be brought in. No, in this case, it's a major league sport. It's being measured against where your stars are and where they are not. And whether Piff signed John Rahm as a shot across the bow, or they did it simply to strengthen their league, however, whyever it was done, it was a seismic shift in the game. Absolutely seismic shift in the game, which causes me to believe that it put a tremendous amount more pressure on what's happening behind the scenes. Again, starting to answer the why, which is where I started this whole conversation from. And the belief that I go back to what Jay said, but we've moved on. The irony of that same phrase, the belief that having stronger coffers, the belief that a focus on the top players and rewarding those top players, to use the terminology that's used, which is code for paying them, finding means to give them money to say stay, may not be enough when players had the chance to make hundreds of millions of dollars elsewhere. They've tried the arguments about legacy. They've tried all of these various things, but ultimately as each player leaves and you get another player sitting up in front, that player sitting up in front and goes, I don't blame anybody for leaving for hundreds of millions of dollars if that's what they want and they think it's going to help them and their families and their goals and their lives. What would you do if a competitor to whatever business you're in came in and offered you an immense amount of money? Massive. So that's what I was trying to understand. And I don't feel like we've answered the question in my mind. I haven't, in my dissertation, and somewhat of a diatribe today, have answered the question of the why. But I think what at least we have through vetting here in this discussion is a better understanding of what the posture was and why the posture was the way that it was, because of how complicated all of this is and where they stand. The fact that we know that these conversations are seemingly accelerating, the fact that Jay alluded to the fact that there would be another time that he could sit before the assembled and be far more revealing, I thought it was very interesting. It's just how interesting it is for me to find that messages, good or bad, whether you like them or whether you dislike them, messages are oftentimes lost in their delivery. When we come back on the Fairways of Life show, we're going to hear from another one of the top players with a different perspective of when someone says, where is the game right now? Where do we stand? And what does it all mean?